Set up the recording. So welcome again. And as I said just a moment ago, my name is Matt Giza, and I'm the director of the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books. And today we're focusing on the application process for the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books. It's a relatively straightforward process, but just wanted to really give folks a chance to kind of go through the application kind of page by page together. And there are a few key areas that we want to highlight this morning related to the application, just so you have a sense of maybe as you're working with patrons in your local library, how you can sort of answer their questions that they might have about the application process and in order to help them get started with the service. The other thing I'd like to say is that really the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books is a resource that I view as one that can be used as a supplementary resource to one's local public library. So we are in no ways trying to replace the library experience that and service that local libraries throughout Connecticut provide to patrons. We're just another resource that's available for folks who qualify for the service. So I'd like to start with a quick introduction to the service and cover who we are and a little bit about the eligibility criteria, and then we'll jump into looking more closely at the application process. So the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books, we use our shortened form of our name as CT Lab, is a unit within the Connecticut State Library, specifically the State Library's Division of Library Development. And this service is actually an example of a federal-state partnership. Our federal partner in this service is called the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled, or NLS, and they are part of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. The way the partnership works is that NLS has a nationwide network of libraries, what they call regional libraries, and they partner with at least one agency in every US state and territory that then serves as the regional library for that state. NLS provides the book collection and also equipment that can be used by patrons who are using the service. And so the regional libraries then in turn provide access to the book collection and that equipment to the residents of their home state. Another way of putting this is that CT Lab here in Connecticut serves as the local warehouser and distributor of NLS resources to Connecticut residents. Our mission, along with NLS, is to provide books and magazines in audio and braille formats for free to Connecticut residents. Everything about the service is entirely free, and there is no way for someone to incur any kind of financial penalty while using the service. NLS, as it's developing the collection, is trying to provide access to the same types of materials that are available in most public libraries, but we're doing it in the braille formats and audio formats. So those are our two primary formats. There is an eligibility criteria to use the service, and this is established by NLS, our federal partner. It has evolved over the time, but as it stands right now, we are able to serve in CT Lab any Connecticut resident who is blind or has any other kind of visual impairment. We can serve Connecticut residents who have perceptual or reading disabilities, so dyslexia, for example. And we can serve any Connecticut resident who has a physical limitation that makes it hard for them to hold or manipulate the pages of a print book, or perhaps their eyes are unable to focus for extended periods of time or move to track the text on a printed page. So an individual only needs to meet one of these criteria in order to qualify for service. And as long as they meet one of those criteria, then we're able to provide them with reading materials through CT Lab. So the overview of the application steps, and we'll review this more thoroughly as we go on with the rest of our time together. First, someone who wishes to qualify for service will go ahead and complete an individual application. And part of that completed application includes certification, which we're going to cover. And then once the application has been completed by the applicant, they return it to CT Lab, and they can return it via mail or email or fax, or if someone is coming through Middletown where our physical location is, or lives nearby, they're also welcome to do an in-person drop-off as well. And then following receipt of the application, we process it, begin to send out the library materials and welcome packets to new patrons. So that's the quick overview of how the application works. We have applications that are available in hard copy paper format, and library staff can request paper applications from us. We're happy to mail hard copy applications to libraries upon request. We also, on our website, have a downloadable, accessible PDF so that folks can either download it and fill it out, save it, and return it to us via email, or if they want, download it, fill it out, print it, and then return a hard copy to mail. So either option works for us. We do not currently have an online application, but this is something that is in the works right now with NLS. So hopefully that'll then be sort of another mode of application that people will be able to use in the future. Okay, the first page of the application, I'm going to just quickly sort of skip because really that's kind of the standard information that most applications will have, where it asks for the patron's name, their contact information, and so forth. We're going to kind of pick up on page 2 now and talk about certification. Certification refers to a third party signing off saying that they know this person and work with them in some capacity, and that the individual who is applying qualifies for service. They meet the eligibility criteria that we discussed a few moments ago. I've got a little screenshot of page 2 or part of page 2 on my screen right now, and it says certifying authority, and then under that it lists a range of potential occupations who can serve as certifiers. So that includes doctors of medicine, doctors of osteopathy, ophthalmologists, optometrists, psychologists, registered nurses, therapists, professional staff at hospitals, other types of institutions, and public or welfare agencies. And then they go on to indicate that educators, social workers, caseworkers, counselors, rehabilitation teachers, certified reading specialists in schools, school psychologists, superintendents, and librarians all can serve as certifiers. To have the certification be considered complete, all that needs to happen is that the certifier will fill in their name, their title, the organization that they work for, their contact information, and then they will select a box that says, I certify that this applicant is eligible for NLS services, and then they sign and date it. So this, we do realize, can sometimes be a barrier for access for potential applicants, and NLS has over time tried to expand the range of certifiers and potential certifiers that could serve as help certify an application. So right now the list is pretty expansive, and we work with people who have questions about who can serve certifiers. The best thing to do is just have an applicant contact CT Lab, and we can work with them to identify potential certifiers if need be. Aside from the certifier's name and what's required on the application, that signature and checking off that the person meets the criteria, we do not require any additional documentation. So no kind of doctor's note or any other kind of certificate is required to accompany the application, and we don't ask for it. So it's just looking for that certifier's name and contact information and signature. Any questions from the audience right now about the certification process? Okay, so I'm going to move on to page 3 of the application. And page 3 at the very top talks about library services. And right now there are 3 options that are listed. One is that a patron can elect to receive a digital talking book machine and cartridge. And in the photograph that is in the top left corner of this 4 photograph grid, that is a digital talking book machine. It reminds me of a tabletop cassette player. It's about um, 8 inches long, it's about 6.5 inches wide, and about 2 inches thick or so. And it contains multicolored buttons that are labeled in Braille and also have raised edges and other tactile clues to help distinguish between um, the different buttons. And they are designed to play special digital talking book cartridges that use flash drive technology. And in this photograph in the upper right corner, alongside the digital talking book machine is a blue mailing container that is opened like a clamshell, and that is the mailing container for a talking book cartridge. And sitting inside that is a white item that is the cartridge itself. That's about the size of a credit card, but it's closer to almost a quarter to 3/8 of an inch thick. So it's thicker than a credit card, and that's what it inserts into the player. So this is option 1 that patrons can select, and this is the most popular option currently. This is what most CT Lab patrons elect to use. Option 2 is patrons can receive hard copy Braille materials, both books and magazines. And option 3 is that they can sign up and register for BARD, which is the NLS's Braille and audio reading download service. Within BARD, there are audiobooks as well as books in electronic Braille format. So when a patron is filling out their application, they can select any combination of 3 choices that I just listed out. Um, on the screen on the right side is an image in the top right corner is an image of someone holding a smartphone, and on the smartphone's display is the BARD mobile apps playback. So this is how someone's screen might look if they were playing an audiobook. And below that is somebody accessing BARD at a typical computer with a keyboard. So there are many different ways to access BARD right now. We'll cover BARD and another DLD mini at some point in the future. But the thing I really want to emphasize is that patrons can really utilize any combination of these services. So at CT Lab, we have plenty of patrons who are BARD only. We have many patrons who just receive digital talking books and cartridges, and we have some patrons that use all 3 of the services that I just described. And patrons can add or drop any of these services at any time. So it's very flexible and customizable depending on each patron's preference. The next item on the application, also on page 3, it refers to book selection. And there are 2 options for book selection: request only and turnaround. And I'll explain each a little bit further. So if a patron selects requests only, that service works such that when a patron requests books, we will mail the talking book cartridges to them. And then after they've returned those back to the library, we're not going to send any more materials until that patron contacts us, either by phone or email to say, I'm ready for more books. Here's what I would like. The other option is the turnaround service. And the way this works is that when a patron indicates their reading preferences and shares them with us, the library management system that we use helps to select books for them. So when someone finishes reading a talking book cartridge and they return it to us and we check in that cartridge, that check-in prompts the creation of a new batch of books for that patron. And so those are that order is created and immediately checked out to the patron. So it could be on their way back to the patron. So this tends to be an option that works very well for people who are very voracious readers and always want to be in supply of books. It does sometimes require some fine tuning as we go along, depending on patron preferences. And we're going to talk about reading preferences on the next slide. But this is something that, staff members at CT Lab can work with individual patrons to fine tune their reading preferences so that they're getting materials they're interested in. It's possible to switch between request only and turnaround anytime that a patron's using the service. So whatever they select when they apply does not have to be what they end up using throughout the entire time that they're using CT Lab services. So the next page 4, bottom of page 3 and all of page 4 covers a patron's reading preferences. This part of the application isn't required for someone to fill out, but especially if they're doing that turnaround service, it's really helpful for them to at least select and indicate some of their preferences, because this does help with book selection. So under the reading of preferences, the first heading is age range, and patrons can select adult, young adult, and children's titles. And with children's titles, we even include an option to put in like grade or grade ranges that they might like to receive. And it's possible to select, multiple categories under age range. So it's fine if somebody chooses adult and young adult materials or also children's materials or any combination of those three. Under subject categories, we list sort of classic major subject categories or headings. Patrons can check any and all that apply to their reading interest. So this is kind of a great starting point in that conversation of being able to understand some patrons' reading preferences. And then following that, we leave a space where they could fill in favorite titles or authors or additional topics that might not be listed under the subject categories. So again, this is something that we can note in their patron profile that they prefer specific authors. And we can even note dislikes for authors and genres or categories as well. The final section that refers to additional preferences refers to receiving materials that have descriptions of violence, strong language, and descriptions of sex. So patrons can indicate yes, that they're okay receiving books that contain descriptions of violence, strong language, sex, and they can, for each one of these, they can choose yes, no, or some. And so they can also say no, or they can say yes, some. I'm happy to receive some descriptions of strong language. And so for each category, each one of these, they can pick yes, no, or some, whatever works best for them. And there is also a section that some books have not been reviewed for the descriptions of violence, strong language, and sex. And if they've not been reviewed, the patron can say, yes, I want to be sent unreviewed books, or no, if it hasn't been reviewed, exclude any of these books, because that might be a way that they would end up with a book that does have a descriptions of violence, and they don't want that. So again, bottom of page 3 and all of page 4 is completely optional, but it does help us with book selection, especially for patrons using the turnaround service. And I should also indicate that there's nothing to say that a person using a turnaround service can't call in or email us with specific requests that they have. So they can do requests on top of the book selections that are being generated for them by the library management system. So just a little bit more about how we process the applications. Once we receive an application, first thing we do is to confirm that it is complete, and especially the certification portion. And then following that, if it's a complete application, we'll begin to set up the patron account. We assign the patron a staff member who is known as a reader's advisor. And reader's advisors at CT Lab are staff members that are trained to support patrons over the telephone, and they help with book requests, BARD support for BARD users, and any other general questions and requests that folks might have who are using the service. And then based on the patrons' preferences, if they're electing to be signed up for BARD, we're completing the BARD registration process for them. And if they're receiving digital talking books or Braille materials, we're working to set up the first order of reading materials for them based on what they selected on their application, both with reading preferences as well as the type of service they wanted to receive. We process all applications within 2 business days. And that means that materials, once the application has been processed, materials are going out that same day or next day, just depending on whether or not the mail has been picked up at our location. And we find that generally speaking, items take about 2 to 4 days transit time in U.S. mail before they receive patrons receive them at their residence. So generally speaking, from the time we receive an application to the time that patrons receive their welcome packet and first materials, we're looking at somewhere around 5 to 7 business days at the most before somebody receives their materials from us. So the last thing I would like to do before I take questions is just share our contact information so that you have it for referral in the future. Our mailing address is 786 South Main Street, Middletown, Connecticut. Zip code is 06457. For phone, we can be reached at 860-704-2220 or 1-800-842-4516. And the 800 number is toll-free for in-state callers. Our email address is CSL, that's CSL as in Connecticut State Library, .accessiblebooks at CT as in Connecticut, .gov as in government. I've also listed our website here, which is portal.ct.gov/CSL/departments/CT lab. And our business hours where we serve patrons is Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So with that, I will stop my screen share, but I will be happy to take any questions that folks might have about the application process. And you can put your questions in chat or go ahead and unmute yourself. So I'm noticing that there is a question in the chat that says, what does the selection of cartridges look like? Are there new titles available? So the selection of cartridges, we actually have a computer at our library that's called Gutenberg computer, and this is connected to the NLS's entire digital catalog of audiobooks. So patrons that are requesting books from with their readers advisors who are request only, they're going to contact us and say, do you have this specific book or books by a particular author? We'll use the NLS catalog to confirm the availability of those titles. And then the request goes to that Gutenberg machine, which automatically loads the books onto a talking book cartridge for the patron. So each cartridge that goes out is custom created for each patron. And one of the unique features about this service is that unlike other digital platforms for books, we can have multiple simultaneous users accessing the books. So there are no holds or anything like that. If the book is available, we can send it to multiple users at the same time. And nobody's waiting on the hold list for items. For the second part of that question was, are there new titles available? Yes. The way books get added to the NLS collection are 2 different ways historically. One is that NLS has its own recording studio with professional narrators, and they have copyright exception, and they're able to just go ahead and record any book that they want to add to the collection. They tend to have a collection philosophy that's very similar to most public libraries, as I mentioned. But if NLS is recording the book, it's generally about 2 to 3 months from the publication date before it's going to be available to patrons. And we're upfront with patrons about that there can sometimes be a little bit of a lag time for new releases. Um, the other way that books can be added to the collection is that if a publisher who has produced a commercially produced version of an audiobook grants NLS access to that book, NLS then just does a little bit of additional sort of markup on the back end to make it a little bit more accessible and work with the digital talking book machines. And then that will be made available to patrons as well. Those commercially produced audiobooks will then be made available in the collection a little bit faster than one that NLS has to record from the start. Just to give you a sense of how many titles there are at this point, in the audiobook collection, it's over 130,000 titles right now that are available, and they add each month somewhere, I would say, between 100 to 300 titles per month to the collection. So it's a resource that continues to grow as time goes on. And there are states that have locally produced talking book programs too. So they'll have recording studios. We do that here in Connecticut, where we partner with a volunteer organization that has recording studios in a few libraries across the state. And a team of 3 people will usually produce an audiobook, and it takes them about a year to do a book. But it's a great way to add topics of local interest or local authors to the collection. And it's made available on BARD, the Braille and Audio Reading Download Service. So then it's available to patrons nationwide. I also noticed that how long can a patron keep a cartridge? Is there a limit how many books can be taken out at a time? Great question. Because each cartridge is created custom for that patron, we don't really do loan periods anymore. We want the cartridge back because we can reuse them and overwrite them and use them again in the future. But we don't really have traditional loan periods anymore. And then is there a limit of how many books that can be taken out at one time? Generally, it's about 18 books. And sort of for new patrons, the way we set them up by default is we say that they could have 3 cartridges at one time with 6 books per cartridge. So that's how we got to the 18. Now, this system where we are able to create the custom cartridges with multiple books per cartridge is relatively new. So we have long-term users that used to the old system where it was 1 book per cartridge. And there are plenty of people that still prefer that method. So if that's the case, that's no problem. We adjust their patron preferences. We set it up so that they can receive 1 book per cartridge, and then we'll increase the number of cartridges that they can have one at one time. So it's equitable amongst all patrons, the number of books that they have access to at one time. So I see a question, what's the difference between talking books and a physical audio CD? The person asking the question, I went through the process to help a blind patron receive talking books only to find out he already had one and he didn't like it, preferred CDs. I'm not sure why. So yeah, so that may have been preference. I don't know if they shared whether it was the format, like they just preferred their CD player and the CD itself and use it because that's what they were familiar with, or if it was related to the narrator. Because if you've used audiobooks, there are times where you might not connect with a narrator's voice. And so that I don't know if it's that case or if it was just the technology itself. So that second part, I'm not sure how to address that specific patron's preferences, but the difference between talking books and an audio CD is that at this point, our talking books are going to be using it's digital technology where we're using the digital talking book players as well as the talking book cartridges. Really, for me, they remind me most closely a cassette player and cassettes. They're sort of like the digital equivalent of that analog technology. Um, the the way the talking books are structured as part of the sort of post-production process after they've been recorded allows for a lot more um, navigation than a traditional audio CD. So what NLS is really trying to do is replicate the same kind of reading experience that someone would have a print book. So they'll take care to make sure that there are navigation points not only for chapter headings, but you can jump forward by 5 second increments, 10, 15, and up to like a whole range of like up to I think about 20, 25 minutes segments. So there's a lot of specificity of like being able to jump into different parts of the book. They tend to include audio descriptions of uh, charts and graphs or other images that might be included as part of a text, where not all commercially produced audiobooks will include that. And they tend to include more of the other like sort of bibliographies that might be or notes that are appearing, especially with nonfiction works. Not every commercially produced book will include this information. So they're really trying to record all of the contents of a book and then also make it navigable for the user. So I think that's the biggest distinction that I could point out between like a commercially produced audiobook and a talking book. But the talking book is, what we tend to use, and that's the terminology that's used within the NLS service. But they are still audiobooks at their heart. There's a question about if an item is damaged, what does that look like for the patron? Will they be charged or not be able to take items again? No, there's no charges for damaged or lost items. There's no restrictions for their ability to use the service at any point in the future. So now, as I said earlier, yeah, everything about the service is free. So that includes like the fact that we don't charge for lost or damaged materials. Um, any advice on how to successfully market the service? And follow up to that was, do we have marketing materials? We do have promotional materials, so feel free to reach out to us via email or phone, and we'll be able to talk with you about what kind of materials you would like. We have a trifold brochure and we have applications that we can send. So those are typically what we'll send, but if you have other requests, you can let us know. Libraries are also eligible to have talking book players and cartridges as demos for patrons to see when they're in your library. So that's something else we can do. Some libraries will have these items, maybe if you have a large print collection or audio book collection on CD still, sometimes they'll create a little display with, brochures there so that the information about the service is near comparable materials. Or sometimes it might be at a surface point within the library, so a circulation desk or a reference desk or so forth. It's really kind of ultimately each library can promote it however they think makes most sense for their particular library and community. But those are just a few ideas and examples of how other libraries I know have shared information. The listing of all available books for patrons to choose from, or is that list too long? It is a little long. We have a catalog. I can share the NLS catalog link in the chat if you're interested. So give me a second and I'll bring that up and put it in the chat. That said, there is something that NLS produces every 2 months that's called Talking Book Topics. And Talking Book Topics is a listing of books that are newly added to the collection. And they arrange it by genre. And then within each genre, they will list the title, author, a book summary, and the book number for that book. Each book is assigned a unique identifier, sort of like a call number that then patrons can also refer to when they request books. So I've just put the link to the catalog in the chat. And since I mentioned talking book topics, let me also pop that into the chat. So talking book topics is available in multiple formats. It's HTML, PDF. We can send it to a patron on cartridge and so forth. So it's a great discovery tool for patrons. And the NLS website archives a lot of the back issues. So I've just put that into the chat so you have that information. So question about are the books abridged or unabridged? They, unless specified, they're going to be the unabridged version. They tend to be the entire work. How are cartridges returned? Do patrons mail them back themselves, or a patron return it to their hometown library and send it through Borrow It CT? Generally, the easiest way is for patrons just to return it in the mail. These items travel through the U.S. Postal Service for free as free matter for the blind. And where the postage goes on our mailing, both when it goes out to the patron and then on the talking book cartridge, when they remove the paper address card that has their mailing address on it, there's a sticker with our address on the container underneath it. And it's printed free matter for the blind. And that tells the Postal Service that these items travel for free. So patrons don't have to pay any kind of postage or shipping fees to use the service. Sometimes we do hear from libraries where a patron or a family, maybe the patron decides to stop using the service for whatever reason. The family's just like, I don't know what to do with this. They'll drop it off at a public library. And in those cases, we'll tell the library staff, you can either put it in the mail because that works, or, borrow it or deliver it will work as well. But generally the US mail is the easiest thing. And there was a question, is it possible for librarians to get a machine and a sample machine cartridge so we can explain better to our patrons? Yes, yeah. So the best thing to do is just contact us. Say, here's the library I work for. It may be the case that your library already has an institutional account with us at CT Lab. And if that's the case, we can, give me one second, getting a little crosstalk there. So if your library has an institutional account, we'll just go ahead and send you the machine and some cartridges, and you can tell us what you want on those cartridges so we can customize them for you. So if you want 2 or 3 cartridges, and you could say, let's put some bestsellers from fiction on one, bestsellers from nonfiction on another one. Let's do some YA titles on the third. You can and you can be very specific about which titles you want too. So this is the nice thing about the service is that we can customize cartridges based on your preference as well. So we're happy to work with you. And if your library doesn't have an institutional account with us already, we'll just set one up with you. We have an institutional application that we can get to you, and then same thing. It's free. There's no charge. It just allows us to sort of have the record of the institutional account, and then we'll be able to send the talking book machine and cartridges. And I have a request for our website link in the chat. I will do that. I will put the general CT Lab website in the chat, and then I will also link to the application so you have a direct. Actually, I'll do the applications page, and on this page you'll find the individual application for CT Lab in English, Spanish, and then the institutional application that I was just referring to. So that should all now be in the chat for everyone. So I think that covers the questions that were in the chat. Are there any final questions before we wrap up? Well, if there aren't, thank you for your time and attention. Just give one more sort of shout out to the DLD minis. This is our new sort of workshop series that we're trying to do to spotlight different services that are available through the Division of Library Development. So keep an eye on the DLD newsletter and weekly wrap up and contact and other listservs where we're sharing information about future events. I know we'll do more CT lab topics, so we'll try to cover individual facets of the service to talk a little bit more about talking book machines and how do those work, so we can give you a demo online. I'd like to cover BARD and a little bit more about how the BARD service works for folks. So please keep an eye out for those in the coming months. So with that, thanks again, and feel free to sign off and have a great day.